I'm going to give you the update, the state of the ministry. You've heard that phrase a lot of times. We'll get the State of the Union, the state of the state of whatever. So I want to go back over some of the things that have happened in 2015 and also end up with some of the things that are developing now. In 2015, we opened 3 centers. We opened in Rogers, Arkansas, in Troy, Missouri, and in Camdenton, Missouri. That's part of that Missouri explosion that's taking place, and it's pretty exciting. We're always getting new information back from Jewel, and it's pretty hard to keep up with everything. One thing that we have to struggle with in the office is, okay, how many centers do we have open? Now, is this center opened or is it emerging? They have no building, but they're doing ministry. They have no director, but, so we have a really hard time, and that changes as we move them from emerging to established. Right now, as of the time that I put this paper together, we had 37 centers, and there are 13 centers on our emerging list. So by next year, we could have, who knows how many, because it constantly is changing. We have 6 that are developing that are almost ready to open. So if we open all 6 of those, then we'll be up to what, 43? And that could happen before the end of the year. Bowling Green in Missouri does not have a building, so we don't know whether they're emerging, but they're doing ministry, so we don't know whether they're emerging or whether they're established. You get what's going on here? Now tomorrow that may all change and I have an update, but that's where we are now. Florence, Kentucky is just about ready to open, so we'll have you on somewhere different by the next time I give a report. Beaufort, North Carolina is in development and should be open within this next year. And then we were able to open in Panama in January of 16. And now, as far as our international development is concerned, we had a really exciting thing happen when we were down to AACC. Jerry was covering the booth, and this guy came through there, and he's kind of a chance meeting, I guess you'd say, Jerry. And so Jerry talked to him, and by the way, if you happen to go to AACC and find Jerry in the booth, this is a really kind of exciting time for us. We're glad to have him there, and he's very good at this. And this is just a sideline. He said to me as we were working the booth last fall, he said, "Rioba, do you know how you can tell a pastor?" And I said, "No, I don't know how you tell a pastor when they're in a congregation."
You have to have Revdar.
Pardon?
You have to have Revdar.
You have to have Revdar. That's what his wife told him. She can always spot him. He said she was rarely ever wrong. And do you want me to tell you what he told me? Shiny shoes.
Blue jeans.
Maybe today. But anyway, this guy came past the booth, and Jerry stopped in, talked to him, and found out that he was over in Missouri getting his doctor's degree, and he's from southern India. So Jerry talked to him, and he became very interested in what we were doing. So the update on that is that right now, on Saturday, isn't it when you're holding it? Right now. On Saturday, as we're talking, Subin and a pastor from Rwanda, and there's a couple others from India that are in a training class, taking our training, so they can take this back to their country. Isn't that exciting? And that all came out of a chance encounter, and we're really excited about that. Another international development that is presently taking place is in Uganda. There were 4 people that were here in Bloomington and stayed for a couple of days, a pastor and his wife, and then a couple of women from Missouri that have been doing ministry, short-term ministry in Uganda. And they are in the process, I think they're leaving on the 15th, to go back to Uganda and to start the training, start basic peer counselor training. So there will be a center in Uganda. And the thing that we've found that's been really interesting, we were told that by an international, a guy that is an international professor, and he went through our training and he said that about 80% of our training is intercultural, but about 20% of it is not. And so there's about 20% of it that needs to be adjusted. A lot of these foreign countries, you know, on this first session that we do on with the animals, on personalities, they don't have any clue what those animals are, some of them, because they don't know them. But we did find out that they are beginning to make some adjustment on it. And you know, in that training, we have one section in there where we point out biblical characters that represent each of those personalities. So they're going back to those personalities and use those as examples rather than the animals. And was that ever a good thing for us? Because we've been trying to figure out exactly what to do with that. So our international work is developing really rapidly. There are issues that keep coming up with international development that keeps us on our knees. So when you're praying, if you have any extra time, be praying that the Lord will help us to know exactly what to do with the international development and how to get our materials exactly like they need to be. Now for the future, as you've already been told, Pam Howe is coming on board as the regional director for Southeast Indiana and Kentucky. She's coming on board on May the 1st. We have contact in Fairbanks, Alaska, that this gal got a hold of us and she said, I think she found us on the web. I can't remember all of this stuff in my head, but I think she found us on the web, and she said, we really need what you have to offer, so would you send us some materials? And we tried about 10 or 12 years ago to open up a center in Fairbanks, Alaska, and it did not get off of the ground. I am so excited by the fact that we may be able to go back in there and get that off of the ground. We were contacted from a girl in Utah that was a volunteer in Greeley, Colorado for us. And now, 15 years later, the Lord is talking to her and saying, you need to bring the Center for Women's Ministries to Utah. Joanne and I just recently took a trip down through the South, and it was supposed to be sort of, she was going to visit some of her family, and I was going to stop by and visit some of mine that's down that way, and it ended up on the way home that we had 2 appointments that were center related. One of them was in Ocala, Florida. There's a church down there of about 4,000 people that have their own counseling center, but we met with their counseling pastor and another gal involved there, and they not only are interested in looking at our materials for training for their church, but they say, we know we can't meet all the needs in this community, so we are very interested in helping you go out into the community and opening a center for women's ministries. You don't find all churches that are willing to do that, but that's very exciting, and that's where we hope that we're headed in Ocala. And then we had gotten this phone call just the day before, I think, that Joanne and I had left, And Joanne had said, I'll just give her a call. We were really busy, and she said, I'll just give her a call when I get back. Well, on the way down there, she decided that she was going to call her. She's in Edmond, Georgia, and we found out that we would be coming back that way pretty close. And she said, I will drive over to Robin Warner and meet you. Warner Robin, I get it mixed up. Warner Robins, I think it's called. But anyway, she said, I'll meet you over there. And we found out that some years ago, she was a volunteer at one of the centers over in Missouri, and the Lord had been talking to her, and she said, I really need to start a center for women's ministries down here. So it's absolutely amazing to me how this happens, you know? How this person that was a client years ago, or how this person that knows somebody. Anyway, and you and I both know that there are no happenstance of things that happen with God. He has everything so well planned. Now, I want to do a little bit of talking about where we are at headquarters and what we feel like our emphasis needs to be. I know that the reason this ministry has been successful is not because I have so much talent and so much ability and am so engaging. I know that this is God. And I know that if it weren't for Him, it wouldn't matter how gifted or how talented or how whatever that I am, it just wouldn't happen. And another thing that I know is the thing that undergirds us and keeps us moving forward is prayer. And that's been our main emphasis at headquarters. We have a weekly prayer meeting with the staff. On Tuesday morning, we just stop everything, and it's usually about 2 hours. And our prayer list is this side of the paper and most of this side of the paper single-spaced. So it takes us about 2 hours to get through it. We pray for each of the center directors, each of the assistant directors, and any requests that you have sent in that you want us to pray for. We pray for that every week. And Connie is in charge of that, and she's very consistent that we pray. She said we tell them we pray every week for them, so if we don't do anything else, we have to pray every week for them. So those of you that are directors and center directors, we mention you by name every week and ask God to provide for you what you need. And I thought this was really interesting. We do each year, this weekend, we do a board retreat, and this year we decided that we needed to spend some extended time in prayer. So Conda made us out a list, and that list listed for each of your centers one request. And we prayed for each of the centers and each of the center directors, and that request that was on that sheet of paper, that was only one page. It took us an hour, not two. We do 3 days, once about every 4 months. We leave the office and we go away from the office. We usually end up at my house since there's nobody there but me. And we do a day of prayer. And that day of prayer, for the most part, is centers around the personal requests and personal growth of headquarters staff. And we found that that's been a real important day for us to spend together. You know, when we're so busy and there's so much going on in the office, it's good to be away and just be able to say, okay, this is what I need prayer for today. And it's been amazing how the Lord has stepped into that day of prayer, and we've been able to see some differences. Now, I know when you look at us, you think, oh, they don't have the same issues that they're dealing with that I do. That's what I always thought about pastors and stuff like that. Well, I found it's all the same. You know, I have issues in my family that the Lord just keeps waking me up at night to pray for, and I know that's true in your families too. So we pray for each other, and it's been very good. Three times a year. This year, in 2015, we had what we call the Day of Intercession, and I think we made some contact with each of the centers so they could be involved too on that Day of Intercession. And then near the end of the year, Joanne said, you know, we had this Day of Intercession and asked God to do all of these things. And we're finding that He's answered a lot of prayers, so we need to have a day of Thanksgiving. So we stopped everything and had a day of Thanksgiving. And if you don't get anything else done as volunteers, my main urge to you would be sure that you keep your ministry undergirded in prayer. The centers that have strong prayer teams are the centers that are accomplishing the most. And so, if you feel like your center's not doing really, really well, maybe you need to go back and see what kind of a prayer undergirding is there at this center. Another thing that headquarters puts a lot of emphasis on is leadership development. And quite frankly, I think we're pretty good at it. As I've looked at what we've done, you know, and how we have instructed our leadership and the efforts that we have put into them. We had 5 volunteer retreats this past year, and the emphasis was on leadership. And then we've had all volunteer retreats where all of the volunteers have been invited, and some of those are taking place within your regions. More and more, the volunteer retreats are taking place within your region. The leadership retreats are taking place often out of headquarters. Those volunteer retreats, the main emphasis that we want to come out of those is personal spiritual growth and leadership skills. Because if you are a counselor, you still need to know some of the leadership skills. And so those are the two things that we try to emphasize when we're doing retreats. When you think about the time that you are together, we like to see spiritual development take place. We like to see personal development, especially for those that are in leadership. And I think that spiritual development and personal development, there is a difference there in the way that I define that. You know, we try to give you some information that will make you better counselors or better workers at the center. Maybe something like we did this morning to help you be better counselors. And then it's supposed to be a time of personal interaction, social, so you're developing in every way. And we're very conscious about that when we're planning, that we bring forth training in all of those special areas. Well, this has been a really exciting year as far as the Center for Women's Ministries is concerned. And on a personal level, most of you probably want to know how far I am along in the book. Remember, I gripe about that. I am still sorting through all the journals. I have about 100 journals that I've kept for since 1983. And I have 3 shelves in my study at home that have journals on it, and I have 5 more to go on row 2. So I have all of row 3 yet to go. I'm in 2004, And I like to think that the worst of it is over, but then, after I get the sorting done, then I have to start doing the manuscript. So, when I talk about sorting, what I'm doing is going through those journals, and something that I think maybe needs to be put in the book, then I've been putting that on the computer, because I just journaled everything in there. So now I've got to go through this stack of paper, because I always print off a hard copy. I don't trust the computer. So I've got a stack about this big that's a hard copy, and I've got to go back now and from that write the actual manuscript. I have about 39 different topics that I'm sorting them under. So it's hard work and I don't like it, but I know it's what God wants me to do. In fact, I let him know the other day, Lord, if you didn't make me do this, I'd dump all of this in the wastebasket. But I want you to pray that what will happen when this book is finished, that God will get all the glory and all of the honor and all of the praise, because it's his story and it's how he did the work. Well, thanks for being good listeners. Always enjoy talking to you. Thank you.
I want to welcome you here this afternoon, and thank you for coming and spending this time with us. The topic I have been led to present today is titled Faith That God is in Control. With the changes in our world that are going on today, and what seems to be a lot of things against the church, against God, and against God's people, the topic of faith that God is in control seem to be very fitting. I want you to never think lightly of Satan's activities in this world and his activities against us, and specifically on there. Many times just trying to convince you not to do something, not to go to a meeting, not to attend something, not to go to the center and work today because you're too tired, you're too busy, there are other things to do. Satan is very, very clever, and he is very, very aware of our weaknesses, and he plays on those. However, one important truth to remember is that God is in control, even over Satan, and he demands that we walk with him by faith, not by sight. This is where we have our calling. Many of you from day to day, every day, have to depend on God by faith to operate your centers. You don't know where your rent is coming from. You don't know whether you're going to have volunteers. You have to rely on God and exist by this faith that he will provide. Examples of depending on God by faith are throughout the Old Testament. Many of you read that, I know, constantly, and so these stories are very familiar to you. But it's good. The Old Testament is an excellent place to go to see yourself. I see myself constantly in people in the Old Testament. Noah built an ark totally by faith, while the world around him totally laughed at him. I'm sure he had a lot of ridicule of what he was going through. Abraham waited 25 years for a child that was promised by God, but he believed God's promise, and that was why he was called righteous. In fact, Abraham really never got to see all of God's promises, because there were promises expanding a good 300 years easily. In fact, these promises were never totally fulfilled in his lifetime, but he still believed. Do you realize that of the patriarchs of the Old Testament, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Isaac is the only one that never has a name change. Did you ever thought about that? God named Isaac before he was born. Also, Isaac is the only patriarch that only had one wife. God chose Isaac's wife, Rebekah, for him. Isaac didn't choose his wife. God's hand is in people's lives on this. Moses' life was controlled by God from birth all the way to the time when he led the Israelites to the promised land. Constantly, God's hand was there. Joseph's life story is an example of God's long-range plans. Sold as a slave, put in jail falsely, to later become ruler of Egypt. And in Genesis 45:8, you have Joseph talking to his brothers saying, "Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. God has made me Lord of all Egypt." Also later in Genesis 50, verse 20, Joseph is saying, "But God meant it for good, in order to bring about the present results, to preserve many people's lives." People who don't read the Old Testament and say, the Old Testament isn't meant for us today, the New Testament is what you want to concentrate on, miss a great deal of illustrations and stories that are helpful for us. The Bible is real history, and it's about real people. And the Old Testament contains many of these examples of God's control and how he provided for people. It always gives me a great deal of reassurance when, you think you are really in need of something, you're lacking supplies or whatever, knowing that God is always there supplying. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know that he will. We can learn a lot from all these examples. I always was just talking in the board on there about examples from Exodus. Been reading on the tabernacle, the planning and the building of the tabernacle. Now, for many years, I found these chapters personally very boring and not very interesting and kind of repetitive. If you look through the details on the veil and the table and the dishes and the tent and the clothing for the priest and linens of blue and purple and scarlet material, of fine twisted linens. I don't know how many times you read that over and over and over again. I think I read of it sometimes. And yet, when you stop to think about it, I've kind of changed my mind. This great detail in measurements are provided, the materials are provided, the men are provided to complete the task. God left nothing to chance. And although it's kind of repetitive to read it, I'm looking at it going, God made it very clear what he wanted. And not only that, but he said, and here's the supplies to do it. And then I'll give you the people who know how to do the skills. And this is what I want you to do. So he doesn't leave us out there hanging. He didn't say, go build me a tabernacle and wait to see what we created. He was very specific. In Exodus 36:7, it is stated, "For the material they had was sufficient and more than enough for all the work to perform it." Do you think God will do less for the Center for Women's Ministries? Do you think he created this and he's just going to let us hang out there? I don't think so. God is not just in heaven waiting to see what we're going to do. He is in control. He is at work in our lives even today. But he does demand that we walk with him by faith and not by sight. We don't know where we're going. We don't know when we're going to get there. But by faith, we keep on going. The person of faith believes God even when circumstances appear to the contrary. Situations like death, suicide that was talked about this morning, loss of jobs, illnesses, these things are devastating. And we don't know why. And many times we're asking. But God knows why. And God many times strengthens us. Good things come out of it. We just don't know. But hang in there is all we can do. What God has promised, he will do. But he's going to do it in his own time, not our time. We often fail to fail to ask, we fail to wait, and we fail to listen. This is our problem as human beings here. Abraham didn't ask God about going to Egypt when there was a famine. He just took off, passing his wife off as his sister, creating all kinds of problems. Sarah didn't wait on God's plan, but came up with her own solution of how to have children. And we know all the problems that started from that. Lot's wife didn't listen to God's instructions. She ended up a pillar of salt on there. Life doesn't just happen. God does have a plan. And this organization was not created by us at all. Just like Abraham and Joseph and Moses, God has used Rehoboam and most of you, many of you in here, to work on this center. And he's used you just like he used the people in the Bible. And it is his plan that he's put into effect. And even though we don't think we're capable, we really, just like Moses, have all the excuses we can possibly think of why we aren't capable of doing what God says for us to do. God says, don't worry, I'll provide you an errand or whatever else you need. Just go and do what I say. God started this organization, and it has always been our goal to follow God's directions in all things. Therefore, it's important that we always ask, we wait, and we listen for God's guidance as we make decisions about the sinners. For the last 27 years, God has supplied workers. He's supplied materials as needed for the operation of the Women's Center. It has grown from one center to a total of 37 or whatever Rehoboam's decided it is at the time. In the United States and in foreign markets. That's amazing. And trust me, if you go to conferences where they are nonprofit, they will tell you that we shouldn't exist and we shouldn't be growing like we are because we don't pay our people enough, we don't have enough people in the main office, there should be more people there. They forget that we've got the one person that many other nonprofits don't have. We have God at the head. Because of God's nature, He cannot lie. What God has promised, He will do. With or without you, He will do it. Therefore, when you return to your centers and experience difficulties with finances, with volunteers, with health issues, with unbelievers, remember these truths about God concerning the Women's Center. God is in control of this organization. He has a plan. He will provide all that you need, and we must believe and have faith. In closing, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to serve as your president this year, and I want to express God's blessing on each and every one of the centers throughout the coming year. Thank you very much. We now have Cecil Tucker, Cecil Tucker is going to come up, and he has your treasurer's report.
Thank you. Welcome to all you again. While we're passing out some people, we're going to talk a bit. Treasury is really communication, and treasurer's accounts. But I have some communication from another source that's just a little bit different, but yet still the same. Notes left in milk bottles. How many are here who used to see milk bottles delivered to their front door? A few. Okay. For those of you who weren't, I'm sorry, but it was a great life. Dear milkman, I've just had a baby. Please leave another one. Please leave a pint of paralyzed milk. Cancel 1 pint the day after tomorrow. Please don't leave any more milk. All they do is drink it. Milkman, please close the gate behind you because the birds are pecking the lids off the milk bottles. Milkman, please, could I have a loaf? But not today. No bread today. Please cancel milk. I have nothing coming into the house but 2 sons who are on the dole. Sorry about yesterday's note. I didn't mean 1 egg and a dozen pints, but the other way around. When you leave my milk, please knock on my bedroom window and wake me up, because I want you to give me a hand to turn the mattress around. Communication. It's all in communication. One more. Please send me the form for cheap milk, for I have a baby 2 months old and did not know about it until a neighbor told me. Not only communication, but the understanding what the communication is all about. You have in your hands the large form of all the different centers, as well as the headquarters center. I'll just share just what's in your the pass out today. The handout initial one tells what the center, the headquarters did here. Let me just go through it. It starts here with the expenses in your little the shiny covered small one, the half size sheet. I can see why they have people having 4 or 5 hands to hold everything that's going on at the same time. You took my picture from the side. It's on the back part of that. The folder here is about the financial statement for the fiscal year end. Headquarters, this year you see was 94% of the income that came in was spent right back out in ministry. 14% was for administration. Previous year, of the income that came in was 14% for ministry, and 6% this year, 14% last year administration. So we thank the Lord for helping us be able to corral the expenses. Cheryl does a great job. Income, this past year, $100,000 from the community was 79% of our total income. Tithe support of $24,000 was 14% of the total income. Ministry events, 1% come in. Total income $126,000, down from a previous year, but yet enough to cover to where we end the year with a positive $7,000 in our checking account. So we thank the Lord for that. He's been great. But again, it can't happen without you and in your ministries, and how as you pray, God gives the funds, provides the funds to enable you to work and do God's work, and enables you to have leadership from Him as to, is there another area that we know about that can start a center? And what can we do to get them, maybe help fund them get started? Is there a way that I can help personally? Do I have a relative somewhere in another area that needs this same kind of a center? How can we help them get one going? And God will answer those kind of questions, those kind of desires. And I thank Him for what you've done again through your own centers, and then as you help share here at the headquarters. Any questions about the financial report? If I can't answer it, I'll find somebody that does. Okay, I'll turn the microphone over to Cheryl.
Jerry's handing out the participation statistics, and every January 31st, your center director or her designate is madly pulling together financial reports and statistical reports to get turned in as soon as December 31st hits. She's got 1 month to finish up 2 major reports to send to headquarters. So the financial report that
Cecil would passed out and referred to was one of the things that, and this one is especially important because the information from this has to be reported to the IRS on the Form 990 as a 501c3. We are obligated to report for everybody. And so it's really critical that we get as much information back from the centers as quickly as possible after the end of the financial year. The statistical reports being passed out now, this gives you an idea of the kind of activity that's been going on. There will be a similar spreadsheet produced hopefully before the end of April. The data is already there, it's just a question of printing it at this point for each center so that you have every year that you've been open side by side in this same format, and you can compare one year to the last. And the information from this statistical report is really helpful from a public relations aspect. You can use it to put data in a grant request. It can be used for speeches or newspaper articles, that kind of information. And so it's helpful, especially for a leadership team, to be really familiar with the information pertaining to your own specific center. And also you can look at the totals with or without headquarters for the impact that Center for Women's Ministries is making in their program activities. And our program activities include one-on-one counseling, Bible studies, support groups, training, and prayer. Okay? So, in 2014, the statistical report, it was with 27 centers reporting. Yesterday I was telling the board that it was 24, but actually there were 24 centers that reported the financial reports. 27 reported on the statistical reports. This year we have 29 and 29, yay. One of the things that's not included on either of these reports are the centers in foreign countries. Their information is not obligatory to the IRS, so thankfully, because it's really hard for them to communicate with us on a regular basis, despite internet and Skype and all the things. Some of them have to rely on internet cafes and have to pay for their time there, and most of these women just don't have the funds to be able to do that on a regular basis. So they are not included in either of these two reports. And while I'm talking about the financial issue, we do have what's called an International Assistance Fund, and we invite anybody who wants to make a gift designated for the International Assistance Fund to write a check to headquarters. That money gets encumbered specifically for the centers overseas. Then we have to find out a way to get it to them safely, which works better in a few countries than it does in others. Sierra Leone is particularly difficult to get money overseas to. But we do welcome, and certainly the women who are leading the ministries in those countries would be grateful for every gift that they can get. When you're looking at the center statistics for 2015, if you take it back and compare it with your report from last year, you will find that we had increases for the number of total volunteer hours. 2014 we had 60,000, almost 6,500 hours given. In 2015 there were 67,400 plus. And that's with just 2 centers more reporting. And by the way, those 2 centers were both from Missouri. One of them didn't actually have to report for this year, but bless their hearts, they wanted to do it right. And so it's one of those emerging centers. They don't have a facility yet, but they're offering programs. So anyway, they're included in the report. We were down in new volunteers, but up and continuing, and up with the total number of volunteers participating from 2014 to 2015. always encouraging, and that doesn't just mean because there were 2 new centers. Because the difference was over 30 total volunteers, and those 2 centers are a little bit small right now. There were 79 support groups. In 2014 there were 79 support groups. That it went up to 111. The aggregate attendance went up from 5,100 to 6,100 for support groups, and that's encouraging because you've got the people who are getting the help that they need in a group setting. Prayer groups are the same. Now that's not encouraging because we added 2 centers. And you heard Rioba say that prayer undergirds the ministry, and it's the most important thing you can do. So we want to encourage that to increase. The good news about the prayer groups is that you've doubled, almost doubled, well, not quite, but the aggregate attendance went from 2,800 to 4,500 taking part in the prayer meetings that the centers were offering. And so that's really great. Keep working to increase that number and to increase the importance of prayer. The Bible studies also increased from 51 to 86. The aggregate attendance went from 3,400 to 5,000. And taking part in Bible studies, that's really important. The trainings also increased. The number of sessions went from 294 to 442. And the hours of training went from 801 to 1,318. So that's a big jump in hours of training, and that's good. That includes basic peer counseling training and every advanced training session that your center offers. For instance, in our count, the training you got this morning for the aftermath of suicide counts for our statistical report as a training that we've offered. Counseling hours went up from 4,600 to 4,900. New clients from 315 to 383. Continuing clients, 158 down to 156. That's not a very big down, except for the fact that we added 2 new centers. So we're expecting that, because that's continuing clients, that enough of them got the healing that they came to get, and they were able to go out and function in a much better way in the world where the Lord's placed them. So, good work. Good work. And it's important for you to recognize that how many counties and how many churches are involved in the center is an important aspect of the Center for Women's Ministries. You know that we are interdenominational. And so if you've got a continuing increase in the number of churches represented in your center and in this total report, that we went from 400 in 2014 to 422 churches represented, that it's meeting one of the things that the Lord told Rioba, that He wanted there to be an outreach and an inclusion of churches working together to provide ministry. Now, all that to say that if the churches were doing the work that they're told to do in the Word, there wouldn't be a need for the Center for Women's Ministries or most of the other parachurch ministries that are out there. In fact, one year one of my pastors asked me, "Do you guys have an exit plan?" And I said, "Sure, when the churches do what they're supposed to do." Okay? So for now, churches working together is an important part of this. Do you have any questions about the statistical report? This report has 29 centers reporting. There were 15 in the state of Indiana. Jackson County Center closed in December. And so next year there will be 14 centers unless a couple of the others that are working to open formally do. Missouri had 7 centers, 2 of which were new. North Carolina had 2. Kentucky 1, and Florence is going to be added to that list next year. Florida has 1. There's a prospect for another Florida center, not probably this year, but sometime soon. Arkansas has 1, and Georgia has 1, and maybe another one coming along. As Ryoba mentioned, they've had some interest from a group out of Warner Robins. And Ohio has 1. There are 6 centers in 5 foreign countries so far, and then you heard the wonderful news about what's happening in Uganda and in India. So while the foreign countries aren't represented in this report, we do try to keep you advised in advance of the kinds of things that are happening globally. And it's humbling to work for this ministry and to see all the things that the Lord is doing in spite of us, because we don't know. There are so many things we don't know how to do. It never dawned on us that somebody in Sierra Leone would not know what an otter is. And the folks in Uganda don't know hardly any of the animals except the lion. And so the people who are familiar with those countries get to come up with a plan for how to present the personality training in a way that the people in those countries can understand. So we're learning right along with you, and we are, as Linda said, entirely dependent upon the Lord to provide the people and the know-how, the materials and the money. And that's true for us at headquarters, it's true for you at your local center, it's true for the church, it's true for you and your family. Be dependent upon the Lord. Any questions? Kathy?
You're maybe going to touch on this anyway, but maybe you did it, it went over my head. But, this is a really big help for us, isn't it?
Yes.
To have this for reporting things, and we want to reach out to our community, and I just wanted to make sure people realize it's a big help.
Yeah, that the information in this report specific to your center is a really good communication tool to share with the folks in your community. And as I said, there will be another report that's strictly your county for each year you've been open, or your center for each year you've been open, that you can compare what the trends are like, up, down, same, whatever. So that you may be able to discuss, okay, why did we go down so far this in Bible studies this year, and other years we've had good participation. We need to get back on that. Whatever the analysis looks like to you, pray about it.
The reason I brought that up is we've had a lot of questions from, well, I won't say a lot, but we've had several when we're trying to get their volunteer hours turned in at the end of the year, and they're like, what's the big thing about you guys having to have all the volunteer hours? And then when they see this and they realize how the cumulative information not only helps us as a center, but it helps for when you're reaching out for possible funding, budget, or not budget, but grants or anything.
Yeah, definitely grants. Kathy's saying how valuable this whole report is to be able not only to show funders or the community, but even your local volunteers to impress upon them. And I know every center director in here is cheering madly inside. Yes, get those volunteer hours turned in on time and keep good records all year long. We know that the volunteer hours is probably grossly underestimated. But do the best you can. And you will notice in the annual report, that the glossy newsletter, there's a little box in there that talks about how much those hours are worth, according to a figure that's set every year by the independent sector and the federal government. And the latest figure was from 2014. Probably any day now the 2015 figure will come out, but as with inflation, that number goes up a little bit every year. And so the value to the community is, what was that, over $1.5 million for the volunteer hours that you and all the people that are working beside you contributed to helping women get the healing that they need. So bless you for that. Bless you for that. If you look inside that annual report while I have the microphone, And there's a picture in the middle that talks about the War Room. How many of you saw the movie The War Room? Okay. Anybody recognize that person in the middle? At AACC, Tony was at a booth. Tony was the male star in The War Room. And a couple of our volunteers who were there for AACC got to have their picture taken with Tony. So they were pretty excited about that, needless to say. There was a lot of Twitter and texting and so I thought it would be a good spot to put that in, to encourage you to get your own war rooms even stronger. Get those prayer groups
Come
going.
in and visit us in our warm rooms.
I'm not telling. Any other comments or questions? Okay. We have